Coming up next is the Power Pact panel of India's most successful health tech companies. We've managed a coup here and we've managed to get Citius Tech, Indegene, PharmEasy, and Krishna, which are probably amongst the top Indian health tech companies today. And moderating the panel today is author and entrepreneur Rashmi Bansal. I'll quickly introduce Rashmi and then Rashmi can do the honors for the panelists themselves. Rashmi is a writer and entrepreneur and a motivational speaker. She is the #1 business books author in India. She has written 9 best-selling books on entrepreneurship, which has sold more than 1.2 million copies and have been translated into 12 languages, including Korean and Vietnamese. She also takes a full credit course on entrepreneurship at the Ashoka University, and it's called The Road Less Traveled. In addition, she conducts writing and storytelling workshops for corporations and educational institutions. I am one of her students on one of these storytelling workshops, by the way. She graduated in economics from Sophia College, Mumbai, and did her MBA from IIM Ahmedabad. Rashmi, I'm going to hand this over to you right now.
Thank you, Shweta. And it's a pleasure to be the moderator for such a Power Pact panel. As you mentioned, Shweta, we have today the 4 really stalwart companies who've scaled immensely in a very short span of time. And I think whatever the panelists are going to say is going to be of immense use and inspiration to all the aspiring entrepreneurs, as well as for everyone out there who wants to learn something from their fellow entrepreneurs. So without further ado, I'll invite each one. Let me start with Rizwan Koita. Rizwan is co-founder and CEO of Citius Tech. He's a BTech from IIT Bombay and has a master's from MIT Boston. He worked with McKinsey before setting up his first company, the BPO Transworks. After exiting that, he started Citius Tech, which is leveraging technology to deliver real value for healthcare organizations. So Rizwan, wonderful to have you here today and looking forward to a very invigorating discussion. Next, we have Pallavi Jain, Managing Director of Krishna Diagnostics. Pallavi has been part of Krishna Diagnostics since its inception in 2011, and she's played a stellar role in the development of the organization. She's been a catalyst in the expansion and growth of Krishna Diagnostics. I think I read on your website that more than 23 million patients you've served since your inception, and you're present in 14 states. And you're also the largest public-private partnership in this field. So wonderful to have you, Pallavi. Looking forward to.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Good evening.
Yeah. Next, we have Hardik Dedia. He will be actually taking the place of Dr. Dhaval Shah because of emergency which came up. So Hardik Dedia is co-founder of PharmEasy, India's leading online healthcare and medicine delivery platform. He's a BTech from DJ Sangvi College in Mumbai, master's from Carnegie Mellon University. His first venture, Ascent Health and Wellness Solutions, was acquired by PharmEasy in 2020, and he's now part of the leadership team at PharmEasy. He oversees the tech platforms and data analytics aspects of the business. Finally, we have Manish Gupta, co-founder and CEO of Indegene, a technology-led healthcare solutions provider with a worldwide footprint, a BTech graduate from IIT BHU. He's also an MBA from IIM Ahmedabad, my alma mater. He worked briefly with Infosys before starting his own company, and he oversees the entire business of the Indegene group of companies. So welcome, Manish, and looking forward to a very interesting discussion today. So let me start by asking you, Pallavi, to just give me a little bit of idea, to give our audience an idea of what is unique and different about what Krishna Diagnostics does, because you're not the first company in this space, but you have rapidly scaled up within 10 years. You've even had an IPO, and you have a vast footprint. So, in terms of your business model, how did you think and act differently and, create this scalable model?
Yeah, Rashmi, the idea behind starting Krishna itself has been very, very unique. Krishna was not started with a well-planned mind. It was a very unfortunate incident which hit hard in our chairman's heart, is when he saw a lady had to sell off her entire belongings to save her child's life. when we had a pharmacy store in one of the hospitals. And when the bills came up, the bills were so skyrocketing, and diagnostics was a very large chunk of it. And there is where, we felt that diagnostics can be looked at upon. And there's where the seed of doing something in the diagnostic space was sown. We started in 2010 in terms of incorporation, but we actually started working on the ground from 2011 mid. We started 2 centers, and we selected rural Maharashtra for starting these centers, where people love that, they're going to do such a big investment at such small locations. But there's exactly, we wanted to know that how it works on. Our first turning point has been, of course, the PPP project, what we did in Himachal Pradesh. And from there onwards, we've never looked back. When we did Himachal Pradesh, here's where we really realized that, the need of quality diagnostics is there in rural India. There are a lot of untouched locations in our country where these services had not yet reached. And here's what we felt that, giving back to the society and doing business, both will go hand in hand. So we grabbed the opportunity. Since then, we've never looked back. From Himachal, we moved on to Tamil Nadu, tapping different states where tenders came out, and we participated in that. We have been predominantly a radiology company until few years, and we diversified, and we added pathology and teleradiology into our portfolio. The main thing, what I feel, why we scaled up or why we could achieve what our peers have taken a longer time. Of course, we are still more very much below our peers who are on a very, very high scale. But in 10 years, what we've done, we are, of course, very, very proud of it. What we've done is because we reached locations where there was need of healthcare. So instead of calling patients to the centers, we took the centers to the patients. When it comes to rural locations like Meghalaya, Manipur, Assam, Jammu and Kashmir, we are giving services in Kargil, Leh, Ladakh. So these regions were where, services were not available. Getting a great confidence from the government has played a very, very important role in our growth journey, because we are seen as a very good service provider in terms of ethical practices and deliveries. So that is the reason when it comes to selection of our name, it becomes like in COVID, there were various governments where we were giving services. We were called upon saying that, would you be able to help us during the COVID crisis? So we literally picked up samples from Jammu and Kashmir, from Assam, from there by chartered flights, and got them here and processed and helped the government to cater the need of the hour. So we have a never say no policy. So we try to give whatever possible, and let's do good has been our tagline, and we live to that line. And that's the reason we've been able to grow till date. And our IPO, everyone knows we were oversubscribed by 64.5%. And that itself says that people have trusted our model.
Wonderful, Pallavi. In fact, yes, we don't see that many centers of yours in a city like Mumbai, but to know that you're in these distant locations like Kargil and Meghalaya, I'm going to come back to you and, learn more about that. Let me move to Manish. Manish, I want to ask you that you started your company in the year 2000. At that time, the idea of digital and healthcare, it didn't really go together. I don't think people in healthcare were really thinking in terms of digital solutions. So how did you actually, get the idea of Indegene, and how did you get your, clients to accept this solution that you were selling? Or was it an easy ride? Was it that when you went to them, they said, oh, this is exactly what we were looking for, and grabbed it right away? So how did that happen? If you could just share a little.
Sure. Thanks, Rashmi. First of all, it's a pleasure and privilege to be on this panel. Thanks for TIE and the IMA, Saiji, to invite me. And it's great to be with you, Rashmi. Thanks. And finally to meet you. So very quickly, as Indegene, we started off with the whole idea of bringing healthcare expertise and technology together and solve problems in healthcare. That was the very, very high level genesis, right? And that way back in 2000, we did not have the buzzwords of digital going on. Obviously, there was internet. There were, by the way, in healthcare, Palm was a very big thing. A lot of people might be too young on this to remember there's a protocol called WAP on phones, right? So we said we'll bring all these things in context of healthcare and drive things differently. Very quickly, we zero down on the life science industry as a place we will play, right? And the ride was anything but smooth. It was obviously the technology adoption in life sciences and healthcare was very low. Interestingly, whenever, and I'm sure Rizwan will echo that, whenever I meet clients and tell them, you know what, 2000, it was very low. People say, okay, it's not changed yet, right? It's still very low. So it was a rough ride. We continued to go on this path. Somewhere in 2010 or so, we took bets that we will double down, and based on some first principle approach, we just looked at, you know what, all the core business processes in life sciences, that how does a drug get sold, right? A rep going to a doctor, whole set of paraphernalia associated around that. Similarly, how do you deal with safety events? How do you file for regulatory, do your regulatory filings? A simple process like a label, drug label, right? Which is such an important process. How does it get managed in 80 countries? And we said, why should it be done this way, right? Why can't it be done in a different way using technology, automation, and obviously we had deep medical expertise in that whole thing. So we invested a lot in those capabilities. We invested a lot in building IP. We did 7-8 acquisitions during this time to build our capabilities in these regions and continue to grow. I would say till 2016, 17, we grew, but the adoption still was slow, right? It started increasing in somewhere in that 2016, 17 period, and probably driven by the success of the FANG companies, right? Every industry stepping back and saying, what does digital do to my business, right? And that's when we started seeing those digital conversations getting much more strategic rather than tactical. And after COVID, obviously, it accelerated in a very, very significant way.
So your inflection point came around 10 years after you started, and probably, then there was a much more rapid adoption around, say, 15 years after you started. And you're saying it's still not, it's not that every healthcare company in the world or in India is yet adopting this technology. So the market is wide open and there are a lot of opportunities. Am I right?
Absolutely. It's very, very, very early days in technology adoption in the healthcare industry in general, but I can talk more specifically about the life science industry. It's early days.
Yeah, I'll come back to you, Manish. Rizwan, would you like to build on that? Because you too started in 2005. And, first of all, what was the problem that you were trying to solve? Since you had exited a BPO, then why did you choose healthcare? And within healthcare, was there a specific problem you were trying to solve? And are you still doing that today? Or did you find something else along the way, which, actually became your flagship product or service?
Sure. Yeah. So I'll just thank the TIE and the IIM and the teams to invite, and thank you very much for that, and really look forward to our discussions. I'll really build on what Manish said, that, when I started my first company in 1999, and that was arguably one of the first BPO firms out of India. And I must say that the first 2 years of that business were very exciting. They were very exciting because we were doing new things. We were trying to figure out how to take voice calls from India, how to do, remote process and all of that. But interestingly, in a couple of years, right, that entire industry became commoditized. And there were literally hundreds of companies that started doing BPO work. And what was a terribly exciting business in 1999, by 2002, it all became a scale game. If you are a very large organization, you could put in, sort of hundreds of millions of dollars in building infrastructure and managing a lot of people, then you could scale. Otherwise, it was a tough business. And I think we made a good decision to sell the business in 2003, which was a successful exit for us. And even in India, the whole BPO sector has in some ways grown in size, but it's very hard to build value in the business because just the nature of the business is such. So coming from that sort of a successful experience, but we knew some of the pains of global outsourcing. We were really excited about healthcare for a variety of reasons. First of all, in terms of healthcare technology, there were lots of large tech companies. Obviously Infosys, Wipro, TCS were not as large as they are today, but they were still quite formidable, and there were hundreds of tech sourcing companies. But for many reasons, and I'll come to those in a moment, we felt that the healthcare industry was different, and there was an opportunity for us to have a pure play technology services business in healthcare, where we could create not only a great service offering and a value proposition, but also build a successful business. And with that foundational assumption, we set up Citius Tech. And interestingly, right from the first day, and it's been 16 years now that I've been running the company, we have been honest to that first principle, which is if you build a very, very deep domain knowledge in healthcare and you can provide a certain learning and domain competency, then you will be successful, because healthcare is more complicated and more regulated and has more complex data structures and more complex workflows than I could argue most other industry, if not all other industries out there. And therefore, what Citius Tech has been able to do is we work across 4 client segments. So we do a lot of work with large technology companies, companies in medical imaging, medical devices, electronic medical records, clinical systems. So that's sort of one segment. The second segment that we work with is hospital systems, large hospital systems who need to build and manage a lot of technology, especially around patient information. The third segment that we work is working with large insurance companies, health insurance companies. And, there's a tremendous amount of innovation happening worldwide in terms of risk profiling of member populations and how do you do better disease management and how do you look at cost and value of care and so on and so forth. And the last segment that we work with is in life sciences, where we are essentially helping our clients with, clinical trials and real world evidence and all of that. And the common factor amongst the work that we do for all these clients is the ability to be able to build, design, architect enterprise grade applications which deal with patient information and the data and the analytics and now the AI machine learning components that can be layered on top of that data. So that's sort of our core business, and we work globally with the large focus in US and Europe. So I'll just pause there, and at some point I can take more questions from you. Sure. And
yeah, I just like a little illustration of some kind of work that you do, because it sounds really exciting. But what does it mean in terms of actually working for a hospital or a client? What exactly would you be doing? So if you could share some example, if not necessarily the name, but
sure. So if you look at a typical large hospital system in the Western world, it'll be interesting for you to know that they may have 200 clinical applications which would be running in the hospital. It could be an electronic patient record system. It could be a laboratory system. There would be a range of medical imaging systems, CT, MRI, and a whole plethora of there. There'll be diagnostic systems. There will be systems for different departments. Emergency department will have its own system, or pathology. I mean, literally you go department by department and a type of work that is happening, and there'll be clinical systems. There will be financial systems, obviously patient billing and all of that, which is sort of the easier part. Anything that is required to be done to drive innovation in a hospital is you will need to stitch together a lot of this information together. So say, for example, you are treating cardiac patients and you want to now say that I want to improve the care of how patient flow is happening within the hospital for everybody who's coming in with a cardiac ailment or chest pain. Now, to be able to do that, you'll need to analyze information. Now, the challenge in a typical hospital or a large hospital situation is that the information is sitting in all these 200 different applications, perhaps.
Okay, it's tech problem looks like.
Obviously, as you get better, you want to do more sophisticated analyses, including running AI algorithms and so on and so forth, is an extremely complicated task.
Yes, so deep
And
domain knowledge and
deep
first
domain knowledge,
principles.
because there may be two different applications which are using different clinical terminologies for the same situation. They will be using even patient matching. One doesn't realize it, but say for example, there's gentleman, two records, there are two databases having Ashish Gupta, right? How many Ashish Guptas are there in your lab information system and your electronic medical record system? And the patient matching itself there is a science, and there is a huge amount of effort required in just patient matching across 20 applications just to make sure that you are matching the same Ashish Gupta across different applications. If you're not doing you're not doing the matching, then you have an inefficient system. But if you wrongly match the wrong Ashish Guptas, you may kill one of the Ashish Guptas, right? So it's a non-trivial task, and a lot of effort is required in becoming good at that. Yeah. So I don't know if that example was good.
Wonderful. That really brought to life what you were saying. Hardik, I'll come to you. I want to know what again, the same question. What did you do differently? Because I think there are many people who entered this domain, but PharmEasy became, quickly one of the biggest players. But India, we can't copy the models which might work in a US, UK, because our country is different and our needs are different. So what is it that, PharmEasy is doing differently, which, makes you the leader?
Sure. Thank you, Rashmi. And thank you, Ty, for setting this up. Pleasure to be here. I think what's different about us, and I think you're right to put up this question because there are competitors who entered before us. We were actually a late entrant into the e-pharmacy space. But there are, I think, two things which we've been doing differently compared to everyone else. Prior to PharmEasy, so actually PharmEasy, when we started in 2015, that was actually PharmEasy 2.0 for us. In 2012, we had given a shot at setting up an e-health platform. Even 2012 was not a great time to start something in healthcare, especially when we were looking at a digital mechanism of access, right? Web technologies were not that great. Even customers really were not looking for a solution at that point of time. And we ourselves were very naive at that point of time. We were just out of college and we thought we could change things very easily. Right? So when we had the setback in 2012, we started focusing more on supply chain side of things because we realized that the pharma supply chain is also quite fragmented. If that were, I would say, consolidated and more digitally connected, then maybe a PharmEasy type ecosystem would thrive on top of it. Right? So that's what we started working on 2012 onwards. And 2015, we thought maybe this is the right time. Hyperlocal apps were coming up. And that's where we sort of rethought that, this could now be a big thing. So we had a better supply chain expertise, supply chain understanding at that point of time, and that helped us grow faster. The other thing I would say is that over a period of time, we've built a culture in our company, which I think helps us run operations in a better way. Every company has its own culture. We have a culture which I think suits us well, and it makes us more customer centric, more data driven, and that has been helping us over the years.
All right. So it's what we see in the front end is actually because of all the work you've done at the back end, which is the supply chain and the organizational culture. So that, of course, as a customer, I don't know, but that's where the real thinking and the innovation has gone in. So wonderful to know that. Pallavi, I'll just come back to you. I want to know, can you share a story about how it is to work with the government? Because many people feel that government के साथ काम करना मतलब headache, मतलब नहीं होगा, मुश्किल होगा. But you have done so many successful partnerships with the government that, I'd just like to know what your experience has been like.
Yeah, I know the notion and the always the comment a lot of people get surprised when they know that government ke saath kaam karte kitna mushkil hota hoga, but trust me, Rashmi, the journey with the government has been amazing. One thing I always speak about is that if you know you're on the right track, if you're following what is a part of the documentation, what is a part of the tender, you deliver what you have promised, you deliver it in time, there is no problem from the government. Of course, there are delays, but there are never denials. We all know that the government money comes in a little late compared to, but that's same with the private players also. Like we have private partnerships, we are 60% government service provider, but we have some 40% tie-ups with a lot of private hospitals. We have tie-ups with private medical colleges. So it's everywhere. It's not that the process is very different to that. One thing what we feel is, working with the government has strengthened us internally. It has really got us to a place where, we know that where we are on the right track. Government has become extremely like a corporate setup. You would be surprised to know that from last couple of years, we have been doing PPP partnership with governments from 2012. But we saw a huge shift and we saw a huge turn 2014 onwards, wherein NHM started playing a very important role. The documentation started becoming very, very transparent. The processes now are completely digital. There are e-tenders. There is no submission of physical copies. The process has become very transparent. There are keys given in. There are messages which come up. There are external agencies like ENY, PwC, or these big fours who are a part of the governance team, which makes everything very easy. And if you give a digital platform to the government, it's on a click. So on the dashboard, they see everything. And when they see the numbers match with what has happened on the ground, then there is no issues. Leaving couple of things which is a part and parcel of every business, we have really not faced any kind of issues working with government. In fact, it has been amazing to work with the government.
It's really wonderful to know that. And I think now that digital health ID is going to be rolled out in India, there could be many opportunities for, upcoming entrepreneurs to work with the government, provide all kinds of solutions. So wonderful to know that. Manish, I would like to ask you, what are the kind of opportunities that came up due to COVID? Because I think that has accelerated the pace of innovation and adoption in almost every industry. So was that also the case with you?
So from our perspective, Rashmi, we had, our point of view or the offering was using digital or commercializing drugs with a digital first approach, right? That was our promise. And that goes all the way from regulatory safety, but more importantly, commercial processes. That was the big theme. But as I'm sure all of us are aware, that the biggest stuff which pharma companies do, especially on the commercial side, is reps pounding the streets, right, and going to doctors. And that is a phenomena across the world. That has been changing, especially in developed world, right? The number of reps, for example, in the United States from 100,000 peak had come down to 70,000 or something like that over time, and similar numbers playing out for Europe. What happened is during COVID, anyway, doctors are not meeting reps, right? So you had to do something else, and hence the digital adoption increase for every pharma company, right? Companies which were doing started this already, they started doing much more. Companies which were not doing anything started jumping on the bandwagon. We had a case where a big top 5 global pharma company issued an RFP, and we said, typically, now it'll take 18 months or 1 year, there'll be 5 meetings, typically what happens over there. And we were shocked at the pace of change. So they finally decided and it started implementation in flat 6 weeks, right, during COVID. Now, so companies which are not doing things started doing things, and they started very actively looking at processes which had got slowed down. For example, clinical trials, right? While everybody was focused on COVID, there are a lot of drugs in development, and these are all very important therapy areas, unmet medical needs, but clinical trials slowed down, right? Because patients are not even going to visit. So recruitment of patients, there are many processes where digital could play a very significant role, right? So all of them got accelerated, right? And to that extent, obviously, our promise was just to do this across the value chain. And we saw a much stronger adoption across the board.
Yeah, wonderful to know that. And I think change always, sometimes it has to be forced upon people. It just doesn't happen on its own. And then you find yourself to be in the right place at the right time, because they're going to turn to you. You have the expertise, you have the deep knowledge. So it's good to know that. Rizwan, did you have a similar experience during COVID? Was it very good for your business?
So this year, generally Citius Tech has been a high growth company, but this year has been a phenomenal year for us actually. So we will organically grow at about 30%, and we also did an acquisition purely remotely of a company based out of Pittsburgh. And these are things that one would not even think about, that you go and make a large acquisition without. Obviously, we had a whole series of Zoom and sort of online meetings. But we didn't really have anybody go there, and we made an acquisition of a reasonably sized company, which was about 20% of our revenues. So if you add both of that together, then this will be a very strong year for us overall. And much like what Manish said, that in fact, somebody mentioned to me an interesting perspective, which I think I can mention here. And the perspective was that being digitally innovative, right, was in any industry, was a leader criteria. If you're a leader in the industry, then you want to be digitally oriented. You want to, and what COVID did was that it made it a survival criteria. And now suddenly, right, if you're not digital, then you no longer exist as a company, right? And what that has done is it's put a phenomenal pressure on all stakeholders within all sectors, including healthcare, to become digitally aligned. And I think that is going to be a fundamental shift in the pace of innovation worldwide, not only at a corporate level, but even as human beings. Now we suddenly, as human beings, have become far more adaptable than we were, because COVID has forced us out of our mundane day-to-day activities, and has shaken all of us up in thinking about doing things in a fundamentally different way. It could be going to work, it could be getting married, it could be everything in between, so
yeah. So COVID has been a boon to some industries. Definitely healthcare is one of them. So that's great to hear that. Hardik, what's been your experience? I think I never bought anything online before COVID. In terms of medicine, I would always go to the chemist, or I somehow didn't think it was necessary to buy medicines online. I think there must be a lot of people like me out there. Did you experience rapid growth during this period?
Yeah, absolutely. So COVID, I think, accelerated adoption of the concept of e-pharmacy, right? The day when PM announced the lockdown, right? We had the biggest surge that we had ever seen in terms of searches for medicine, add to carts, and actual orders as well. And on that day, we were, finding it difficult to run operations as well, right? Because suddenly the lockdown was announced, and there was very little information coming in. So there was a big disruption as well, which happened on the operation side. And obviously, from a demand perspective, we had never seen such a surge in demand, right? So it helped us understand that the concept of e-pharmacy is maybe now more applicable to everyone. That yes, maybe I don't need to go to the chemist in certain situations. Having this option is good. And the most extreme situation was the lockdown, right? So I think it helped us push the concept of e-pharmacy to a very broad audience. And what we've seen is this has been a very rapid growth here for us. And like maybe Citius Tech, what we've been also able to do is do some acquisitions in this period as well. So I think it's been an 18-month sort of a period where we've been pushed to the limits, because teams have had to work remotely. And our supply chain and operations team have had to work in a situation where lockdowns kept coming in, kept going out, and there were new rules every day. So I think it's been a very, very difficult period for everyone. But we are very proud that we've been able to serve a lot of customers in this period, and hope we could have helped them in this period.
Definitely. So really what I'm hearing from all of you is that you had a vision for where you want to go, and you started walking the path, and then certain opportunities presented themselves. Like COVID is also an opportunity, but you have to start with that vision. You have to start walking the path, and then everything opens up for you, because you are ahead of your time, and that's when you can really benefit from these opportunities, because you were there. So I think I'll like to invite some questions from the audience, but before that, just one last question to all of you, which is advice that you would give to any aspiring or young entrepreneurs, people who are starting out today or just a couple of years into the business? Just couple of lines. Like if anyone asks me, I to usually just say, stay hungry, stay foolish. That is my writer's advice. That is a very broad advice. So, but you're in the industry. So what would you like, one piece of advice? We'll start with you, Hardik.
Sure. So I think one clear advice would be don't think about valuations much when you're building your company, when you're building culture, when you're thinking of solving a problem, right? Valuations are a byproduct of what you do. So keep that. I mean, don't even think about it, right? What you should think about is culture of the company as you're growing. What you should think about is what problem are you solving, and don't get too married to the solution, right? Rather be married to the problem statement. Try to solve that rather than saying that the solution I've created is perfect and it should work. That generally doesn't work out. We've seen that in the past with ourselves. We built something which we felt people would want it, but they didn't. So rather solve the problem than create a solution which you love. So yeah, and valuations don't keep them in the thought process.
Yeah, it's important to hear that, because all that we read in the newspaper is valuation, but that's the result of all the work that you put in. I mean, it's not the goal in itself.
It's not the goal.
Yeah.
It's not the goal in itself. If your customers are happy and you're solving a problem, valuations will go ahead and grow as a byproduct.
Yeah, Manish.
So, Rashmi, I'm growing older. So if somebody asks me to give advice, I just go on and on. So I'm going to make it two. So one of them is, I think I'd heard this Bill Gates quote. We always overestimate what we can do over a year or two, and always underestimate what we can do over a decade, right? So having that long-term vision and not getting either super excited or dejected by short-term stuff, right? That's one thing. Significant value creation takes time. So that's one advice. And the second thing, at least, which I've realized in this path is it's important to stay true to yourself, right? This is what is happening in the US. This is what everybody else in the market is doing, whether it's fundraising, whether it's different type of branding culture, right? You have to stay true to yourself. That's the only way to sustain long-term value creation.
In a nutshell, perseverance and staying true to yourself, very important, both qualities. Pallavi?
Yeah, hi. I would take 2 minutes, because when you asked the previous question of how digitally COVID impacted, definitely all three belong to digital, and of course majorly into the pharma chain, but it definitely had a major shift in diagnostic industry. So I wanted to use this platform to just put in my view on that also. That definitely there was a huge rise in home collection, because people were scared going out. So the digital platforms really help people book their tests. Also because, there are a lot of senior citizens, who are not able to go out of the house. And during COVID, it was a bell ringing that, how strong the healthcare needs to still work on, because we were there, but we were still not there. We could not work from back end because we had to be on the ground. Suddenly, because of various changes in the government norms, the government rules, the GRs coming up every 10 days, something different coming up. There was a lot of confusion and chaos in the minds of the common man, because obviously people didn't know what is happening around. And then suddenly the number of tests got increased, handling 40,000 samples a day was a humongous task, but yes, digitally, because we were so well connected and, we utilized the platform of technology so well that we could do that. One beautiful change what we saw was that our staff on ground informed us, from Assam in the earlier days of COVID, where, RT-PCR kits were very short and, we were importing these kits. So one of our staff called up and, informed us that, ma'am, we did an X-ray, and even in the X-ray, the patches are clearly visible. So X-ray also can be utilized as, the first diagnostics. And that's how with IIT alumni we launched India's first digital bus, which was taken to the most remotest and most infected areas. So definitely it has boosted. And if you have to ask me what advice, I'm too young to give an advice, because we're just a company wise a 10-year-old but what Manish said, I would also second to that. If you're true to what you're doing, and if you have your ethical values in giving services rightly, then there is no looking back, because we always tell our staff, that there has to be empathy, there has to be care, because we are in an industry where, our report will decide the line of treatment and treat every patient's diagnostics or blood sample collection or any test should be done in a manner thinking that he is your family member. And, profit is a byproduct of all the services you give. So definitely, instead of doing too many things, if you focus on what you want, and if you see that, you are doing it ethically correct, and you're on the right path, then I think, as even Hardik mentioned, or even Manish ji mentioned, that numbers, valuations, everything, it'll keep coming automatically.
Yes. So be ethical and have empathy, because it's just not an ordinary thing. If you eat a poor meal at a restaurant, you might get stomach upset for one day, but a wrongly diagnosed illness can just result in a death, and it's something to be taken really seriously. So that's a beautiful piece of advice.
Absolutely. Just like Rizwanji said that, if one Ashish Gupta's record is not matched correctly with the other Ashish Gupta, it will be completely haywire. Similarly, these are very sensitive things which we need to, and we are responsible for somebody's treatment line. So we need to be ethically correct, doing what is right.
Very true. Rizwan?
So, my sense is, and this is clearly a healthcare panel. So I would like to say that healthcare in India, right, there is no question, is amongst the 2-3 sectors that needs the most attention. And conversely, you could argue that it is one of the top 2-3 sectors where there is phenomenal opportunity for innovation. And in particular, even within healthcare, if you look at digital healthcare, in some form, fashion, all of us are, in the digital health business. The opportunity is even more exciting. And there is, for those who are interested, right, you all should, each one of you all should just look up what is happening with the announcements around the digital health mission, the NDHM, the National Digital Health Mission, and some of the underlying platform components that are getting built out. And one could make a case, and now, healthcare is complicated, everything takes a very long time, right? But one can make a case that in the next 5 to 10 years, if the implementation of the NDHM is done the way it is supposed to be intended, then it can have a profoundly transformational effect on the way healthcare, in business of healthcare in India happens. Not very different from the fundamental impact of what Aadhaar has had in the business of financial services and other industries like land records and others, which has been truly amazing. So we are sitting at the cusp where over the next 5-10 years there is going to be a tremendous amount of opportunity in healthcare, and creates so many new business models, so many exciting opportunities for entrepreneurship, that it's an area which is rich for innovation. Having said that, everything in healthcare takes time. It takes a lot of energy. One needs to get into the weeds of doing things, and one has to be extremely patient. And patience has different forms. It's got valuation implications, it's got lifestyle implications, etc. So, but if you're willing to get your hands dirty, you're willing to get into the trenches, and you're willing to hang in there, then healthcare has tremendous opportunities over the next 5 to 10 years.
Great. So you must be willing to get your hands dirty, be patient. I think every one of the panelists has mentioned patience is a virtue. It's true of every industry, but definitely true for healthcare, because it's not that fast moving in industry. I'll move to the questions from the audience. So we had one question from Prashant Soni. I think Rizwan, you answered it partially. How do you see digital initiatives brought by the government improving Indian population health, and how can technology be adapted? Basically, what are the opportunities? I don't know exactly what he means, but how can, technology adoption and digital health idea? I think there's Ayushman Bharat. There are many other things happening which are actually more for the rural areas or for the urban people who are not like people like you and me, but for the lower income population. So any thoughts on that, Pallavi?
Yeah, so basically, one major change what we saw was not only during COVID, but what we saw was yes, digital adaptation and technology adaptation has played a very, very important role. When I see in terms of Krasna, we were able to scale up largely. One reason was also introducing teleradiology, because we know that in India or worldwide, the availability of a radiologist is very, very low, and a radiologist wouldn't want to go and sit in a place called as Rampur, Rodu, or anywhere in Meghalaya, Himachal, because obviously they want to be practicing in a urban location or in a metro. So way back in 2011, when we introduced teleradiology in Himachal Pradesh, it was very well accepted by the government, and the government also understood that people were not be waiting for. Otherwise, initially before teleradiology, doctors used to come in government centers like once in 2-3 days and then report all the cases. So people had to literally wait for the CT scan report for 2 or 3 days, which now by using teleradiology platform, they're getting within 2 to 3 hours. And in cases of trauma, it is made available within 15 to 20 minutes. So that's one adaptation which has really helped, diagnosis reach places. Like I mentioned earlier, also in a region like Kargil, where a patient gets his X-ray done and his image comes to our teleradiology hub, we are able to give his report within an hour, and he's able to get his treatment done. Otherwise, imagine somebody's had a trauma and he's sitting with the elbow, and he doesn't know where the fracture is. It is a difficult situation. So that has played a really good role, and people have started accepting it. Ki doctor nahi hai, par meri report aa rahi hai. So that's people have also started adapting technology.
Yes, that's a great observation. And sorry, my dog has also given class participation in the panel just now. Okay, I have a question here for Manish. It's from Amit Mukim, who says it's been a great session, enjoyed it. And his question is, do you see any shift in the mindset towards India as a business destination due to the pandemic, as well as the talent situation?
So there are, at least what we see, two things. One is that when global pharma companies are thinking about the countries they want to roll out infrastructure, right, digital infrastructure for various processes, India is definitely included in those, right? And that's something which we've been seeing for some time right now, right? So there are 15, 16 countries, a list of that, and India is included in that. But the interesting thing which we observed over the last 18 months or so is the Indian companies jumping onto the digital bandwagon, right? And fairly aggressively in India, as well as at least in the United States, right? That they're saying, listen, how do we reach out to physicians, patients using digital? Definitely in India, but they started also experimenting with this in at least in the United States. So that's some of the changes we have seen in context of India.
Okay, do we have time for one last question? I'll just go ahead with the last question.
Yes, we do. You actually have 6 or 7 minutes, Rashmi, so you can go
We
ahead.
do have. Okay, fine. Sorry, I'm just trying to be like really time conscious. Okay, so we have a couple of questions which we'll take. There's a question for you, Hardik, from Shweta. How do you see customer penetration evolving in tier 2 and 3 cities in terms of the e-pharmacy model, and are there any barriers to adoption?
Actually, very few barriers to adoption. In fact, tier 2, tier 3 lends itself well to the whole e-pharmacy concept, because generally there are fewer pharmacies there. Availability is also an issue. If you see yeah.
Yeah, I think all the e-commerce portals have educated people a lot, and
Yeah, I think they're following
the
them.
generation is quite adept at using. So there's another question which says, how do you, from Uma Nambiar, how do you monitor medication errors in a pharmacy?
Medication errors. Oh, so does she mean prescription?
I'm not sure. I think, yeah, but in your case, don't you just upload the prescription and then it comes to me at my address? I don't think there's any.
So what we do is, again, a lot of stuff happens in the back end for us. Once you upload a prescription, we actually go through a digitization process. where pharmacists and other consultants actually digitize the prescription that you have submitted. And basis that digital version, there are a lot of checks. There are multiple checks which are basis all the acts which have been written, and we've sort of created a holistic
Okay.
validation of the
Okay,
prescription.
maybe she means like if the pharmacist gives the wrong medicine, but I guess you have enough checks and balances in place.
Yeah.
We have a question for you, Pallavi. Having worked, it's from Yugal Sikri. Having worked with governments and dealt with EHRs, how do you see the traction on EHR coverage in India? I'm sorry, I'm not aware what is EHR, but
That's electronic health records.
Okay.
Yeah, so we really don't have to deal a lot, because the patients who come, they go to the government counters first. Their first line of interaction is with the government. The prescriptions are made there. The treatment line is planned there. The tests are prescribed there. The patient walks in with the referral or the prescription to our center. We do their tests. However, we have a huge data, which is different various contracts we have is with the government, has their own norms, terms and conditions in the usage of this data. But yes, government is really monitoring this. Government is taking very good steps in terms of maintaining this records, and we also as a service provider have to maintain these records for at least 5 years. If there are medical legal cases, it has to be kept for a little longer time, because we are in government hospitals, because we deal with patients who come from trauma, or there are some court cases, or there are some kind of other accidental cases. So we have to keep this records. So I mean, it's not a very, very tedious, or it's not a very complicated process. It's smooth as of now.
Okay. We have a question from Dr. Shaji Ailat. He asks, how is data privacy bill going to affect the healthcare sector? Rizwan, any thoughts on that?
In all candor, I'm not the expert here,
Okay.
but I would say that in general, and this is sort of more a directional answer, that the new policies that have been set up by the government of India are largely following international best practices. So, for example, the NDHM framework, relies on, and I'll use some healthcare acronyms here. They will use, the FHIR standard for interoperability, SNOMED, LOINC, and others. So, in general, I would say that the approach that the government of India has taken is to try and align as much of the standards with the international standards, but there is a chance that Hardik knows the answer to that question. So maybe I should pass it on to Hardik if he has a point of view.
Yeah, it's open to all the panelists. I mean, I just...
Yeah,
anyone else
I have a...
Yeah.
Yeah, I have a point of view on this. Again, not an expert, but yes, in general, consumers around the world are not very savvy with their own privacy, right? And with their own data privacy. I think this will be a very good step because when you look at healthcare, you have a lot of sensitive information, whether it's about your diagnostics, whether it's about your health records, whether it's about even invoices that you're getting or insurance policies. So the way this data gets shared across all the entities, right? It could be a pharmacy, it could be a diagnostics player, it could be an insurer, it could be a hospital. The way it gets passed around in a way where it ensures that you maintain your data privacy. I think that's important. It needs to be standardized and well regulated. And I think India is following, as Rizwan said, it's following maybe on the guidelines of GDPR and HL7 in terms of, so that interoperability also works out and you also get safety and security and privacy.
All right. So I think many opportunities for young entrepreneurs, people who want to enter this sector, though we have, 4 of you who've done amazing work. We're looking forward to IPOs from those of you who haven't had it already. But there are so many opportunities opening up still. It's not that, you've exhausted all of them and there's nothing left, because I think really NDHM is one of the big opportunities for entering the sector, and working with the government is going to be a way to move forward, because we have a vast and complex country. Even today, like most of the vaccinations are happening in government hospitals and not in the private sector, but it's good that we have both the options.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, Rashmi, to add to this, during the COVID, we actually saw that, when private hospitals had, were exhausted and, were not able to cater to the patient, it was the government who came up with all these COVID centers. Coming up with COVID centers in such a quick time was really commendable and, could cater to the large population. Also to add, because I read in the chat box, the question what Mr. Yugal had asked, and he wants to know how population is adapting, because the answer what I gave, he's further asked that how, of course, people in rural India are adapting to technology, because now everyone has a smartphone or everyone has everything in hand. COVID has taught to call everything online. I mean, I still remember when we used to tell kids that, don't use phone for a longer time, or don't use iPad or a laptop for a longer time. Now we tell them, please sit on the laptop and get your studies done. So this is the technology what everyone is adapting. People are now getting used to it, getting reports on WhatsApp or or on the platform we have created for them. So Yugalji, we are there, but there is still a lot to do.
Thank you, Pallavi, Manish, Rizwan, Hardik. It's been a fascinating discussion, lot of wonderful insights, and I'm sure inspiration for all those who are listening. Over to you, Tai.
All right, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Pleasure having participated in the session today. Thanks.
Yeah.
Thank you for this opportunity. Really enjoyed it. Thank you.
Thank you, Rashmi. Thank you all. It was a wonderful session.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for inviting
Thank
us.
you. Thank you, Kanav, for inviting us. Thank you, Tai. Thank you, Rashmi. It was great interacting with all the fellow panelists, and it was a great session. Thank you so much, Naveen. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Pallavi.